open to any kind of questions.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Mayank. It's very comprehensive. We can now get into the Q&A section. I will be asking you a few commonly raised questions that we have encountered with our student prospects. For example, okay, I'll start from the very beginning. So like, what kind of questions or information do I need to ask myself first before getting a graduate student loan, even from Prodigy?
Sure. So, I mean, loan in general, I think the main thing is like, there can be multiple ways in which the student can finance their studies, right? So obviously it could be via their own savings, it could be via scholarship that they have received. However, if all of these sources are falling short, then obviously you can consider a loan. So loan, I mean, generally speaking, if you can avoid a loan, that's great. But if that's not the case with you, then you have to choose a loan. And in that case, you can definitely consider Prodigy Finance as an option. There are multiple different lenders out there, both in your home country and in the country of study. But with Prodigy, the uniqueness is that we are targeting international students, right? So for us, our product is designed for international students, and it is basically well suited for international students. And from an eligibility perspective, as I mentioned earlier, we cover a lot of different nationalities that we support. And the only condition that is required from eligibility perspective is that you need to be going to a school that we support and a course that we support. In this case, obviously, ESSEC, MBA, and a couple of other courses at MBA we support, so shouldn't be a problem at all.
Thank you for that, Mayank. You did mention earlier that for Prodigy Finance, it is a good option for international students. Would you be able to share why is this so?
Well, international students, I think, are very, like, as it's a sweet spot, right? In a way, in the sense that if they go to a country, let's say they come from India, and if they go through local banks based out of India, Indian banks typically will ask them for a huge amount of a collateral or a bank guarantee, right? They will say that if you're taking a loan of $40,000 US, you need to put an equivalent bank guarantee or a bank deposit of the same amount, right? Or alternatively, they will ask you to submit documents of your home that you own, right? So again, it'll be a collateral, which I understand that most of people in India do not have, India being a middle income country, right? So that's the problem with local lenders. If you go to, let's say, a lender from the country of study in France, then the problem is that the French banks or the French lenders, they will look at your credit history in that country, right? So they will not look at the credit history that you've built in India, for example. They will ask for a credit history in France, or maybe at the maximum in the European Union, right? Which again is a problem, because if you have not lived in that country, you don't have that credit history, right? So they will not be able to lend you. So international students in that sense are underserved, and that's the problem we are trying to solve. And that's the reason why we are best suited for an international student.
Yeah, that's very well explained, Mayank. Great. It's good to know that international students have Prodigy Finance as a good option to go to if they're financing their studies overseas. Is there like an eligibility criteria for one to apply for a loan with Prodigy Finance?
Eligibility is mostly linked to the university or the school that the student is going to. And also from the country that the student is coming from, right? So I think in both the aspects, specifically for ESSEC Business School, I think the students are well covered, because ESSEC has been a school that we have been supporting. Likewise, MBA as a course we have been supporting from ESSEC. That is also not a problem. And in terms of countries of coverage, we do support 130 odd countries as of now, which is a very, very broad, let's say, coverage. Countries such as India, China, Singapore, all of these APAC countries, I think these are what we already support. So if you have a lot of students coming from these regions, they need not worry, because from a nationality perspective and from where they are going, they should be definitely covered. So from a broad eligibility criteria, I don't foresee too much problems, to be honest.
Great. That's really a fast-free option, actually, when I hear your explanation. So if a candidate happens to be unemployed when applying for a loan, would that actually pose a problem?
No, it shouldn't, because our model is based more on future earning potential, right? We are
Right.
looking at the quality of the education that the student will undertake. And if a student is going to a business school such as ESSEC, we know it's a very prestigious program, we know it's reputed, and it gives you a lot of options in terms of employability, right, across the globe. So that is what we really like take into account, and we give more emphasis on the future potential rather than where they currently are, right? And that's why we don't look at credit history too significantly. We for like I mean giving a non-related example, but we do have a lot of borrowers who go for their MS, right? And MS happens immediately after their undergrad, right? These are students who are fresh out of college, they haven't worked, they don't have any credit history, and those are the students we also fund, right? So not having a job is not really a problem. All we look at is the future potential.
Great, great. Good to know about that. And you've so far mentioned everything that is obstacle-free for applying a loan with Prodigy. But could you share with us what are some of the common mistakes that students make in their applications, and how could these pitfalls be avoided?
Sure. I think the most, let's say, challenging part, or where like there tends to be some confusion, is the verification documents process, right? So I think that's a place where the student can be a bit more proactive. And when I say proactive, I would basically recommend students to start the process early and try to apply as early as possible, because in general, if they can get sorted with the loan as early in the process as possible, it just gives them a lot more peace of mind, right? There's one less thing to do. So my general recommendation would be that start early, be proactive in terms of managing your documents. We have all the information available on our website in terms of what documents are required. So if there is a situation where you need to arrange a document from your bank or from some other source, please be proactive and get those documents sorted out, right? And I think that's one piece. The second piece, which I would also recommend, is that a lot of students have this perception that until and unless they get an admit from the school, they cannot start a loan application, right? Which is not the case, right? In case of Prodigy Finance, you can just go ahead, choose ESSEC Business School MBA as your course that you want to do, and submit an application with Prodigy, right? Which will give you a very good idea of what is the loan offer that we can offer you or give you. When you start the verification, that is a point where you have to actually submit documents, right? Before that, you don't have to give any kind of documents. So you can get a quotation from us, you can get a very good sense of what the loan looks like, and that can happen even right now, even today, right? The loan documentation happens later. So all of these things will help you expedite the process and give you a leg up and give you more peace of mind later on in the journey.
Great. For students who are applying very late into the whole application process, maybe it's not due to any issues, but just it's a matter of time that they take to get there. How long do you think a student should take to adequately prepare themselves in the collation of all the documents or the process that we've just mentioned, just so that they are sure that they can safely acquire the loan that's required before starting the studies?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are more, like I would say most student cases are pretty straightforward, right? I mean, they are able to arrange all of their required documents fairly quickly in a matter of few days, right? However, obviously there are some student cases which maybe they have moved across different continents, and because of various reasons, there might be some, let's say, additional complexity in their case, right? Where they have to arrange documents from banks which are across different countries. Right. So in those cases, I think the student need to just look ahead a little bit and prepare a little bit more, right? But from a timeline perspective, I can't like give a sense of will it take days or weeks or months. But I think based on the student's situation, they should be able to assess how easy or how difficult would it be for them to sort of arrange those documents, right? I can give my own example. I mean, before going for my MBA again in Europe, I had lived in US, I had lived in Singapore, and obviously in India. right? So I had that same complication where I had to get documentations from all of these three different countries, uh, both for the loan and also for the visa process, right? So I started my like preparation way ahead in advance, right? Like pretty much at the time I got my admit, I was like, okay, now I have to prepare and plan for my next milestone, which is the loan. Right. So I think you do get a sense of how complicated your situation can be, and then based on that, you can like really start ahead or start late.
Yeah, so as what you have mentioned, Mayank, it's always good for the student to start as early as possible. And even if they have not gotten a seat in their choice of institution, it's always good to kickstart the process, because they can then check back with the advisors at Prodigy to see if the documents are in place, if there's anything more that they need to furnish with regards to the application, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Yes.
Great. So I'm moving on to something more specific, which is after receiving the go-ahead for the application. So when do the funds usually get dispersed?
Sure. So fund dispersal happens, I would say, just few weeks before the classes actually start. And this may vary a little bit based on the timeline that is given by the university to Prodigy Finance, right? So what really happens is once the student signs the loan agreement with Prodigy Finance, we initiate a process where we are getting in touch with the university and really aligning with them in terms of when is the date or the timeline when they require the funds from us. Right. So in all of this, the student need not be bothered. They need not be worried. As long as they have signed the loan agreement, they should be fine. And then we will do the required steps after that. So, I mean, obviously, students, I understand they can get anxious. They do follow up with us as well. But like the process works pretty smoothly. We have all our processes in place with all our partner universities and schools. So disbursements happen timely, and the student gets notified one way or the other, either via us or via the university, that the money is in place.
Right. So I hear you that the funds usually get dispersed 2 weeks before the program actually starts. So this means that sometimes the students are required to pay deposits in advance to reserve their seats for the studies. So does Prodigy Finance loans cover that part of the deposit payment or admin fee payment before the program actually starts?
Well, I mean, typically, because the disbursement happens late and the confirmation money that the student has to pay is a bit earlier in the journey.
Yeah.
Typically, what happens is the student has to pocket it on their own. They have to fund that amount, the confirmation fees on their own. However, they can obviously add that money in the loan amount should they need it, right? So they can obviously like add those 5,000 or 10,000 extra US dollars if that is a requirement in anticipation, kind of a thing. But like from an out of pocket expense, from a like cash flow perspective, it is something that they need to furnish on their own.
Right, that's very helpful. And thanks for thinking ahead a few steps at a time, because it is important for the students to factor in any additional payments that they need to fork out during the entire study so that they can work the total finances into the application package itself. So take, for example, if I have actually applied for X amount of a loan from Prodigy, but only to realize, like what you've mentioned, I forgot to factor in some other fees or costs that I have overlooked at the very beginning, can I actually change the loan amount after accepting the conditional offer from Prodigy, or at any point in time after liaising with Prodigy?
Yes, I think all of that is possible. You can the student can always write to Prodigy Finance and say that they have some changes that they require. They might have to submit a fresh application if there are significant changes. I think, but largely speaking, we have seen cases in which the loan amount gets revised either up or down. Both of them are possible, but obviously they need to be in the permissible limits, right? So, for example, the minimum loan that we can offer is a 15,000 US dollar loan, right? So, if the student somehow only needs 10,000 worth of loan, then that is not possible. Likewise, if like we assess that the maximum loan that we can give to a student is 50,000 US dollar, and the student is, let's say, asking for 55, then the maximum we can offer is only 50, right? Because like that's the limit that we operate in. But yeah, revising up, revising down, both of them is possible. Obviously, the earlier the student does it, the better. If it happens much late in the process, then there is obviously more complication and even a possibility that it might not end up happening.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're actually approaching to the close of this segment, but before we actually come to a close, I'll let Mayank does the honor of explaining how Prodigy actually differ from other conventional service providers such as banks and financial institutions, so that our dear students out there will know that Prodigy is the preferred option when it comes to applying for international study loans. Mayank?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I think the crux of the matter is really the fact that the company has been founded by very personal experiences from a lot of international students who have been in situations like yourself, right? And having experienced that firsthand, we really understand higher education. We understand the problems of international borrowers, and that's why we have designed our products in a way that it really meets the need of international borrowers. We are not some random local banks sitting in India, which do not understand what's the difference between a ESSEC MBA versus some other non-reputed school, right? So we understand where the student is going, why they are going there, and what is their requirement, right? So we really understand that, and I think that's why we have, like, from day one, designed a process which is fully online. It is not like a COVID situation that we switch to an online model. We are always online, right? And we understand the student journey through and through, and that's why we have designed our product to meet their needs. I think that's why Prodigy is a great option for international students, and I would encourage you guys to come and try it out.
So we have come to the end of this segment, and Maya, would you like to take us through the contact details if one is keen to apply for a loan with Prodigy, so that our dear viewers can have a point of contact if they need to reach out to you or your colleagues?
Sure, absolutely. It's on our website, or you can just follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. I mean, I'm very responsive on LinkedIn, so that's another way to get in touch. Or if you just need to speak to a service agent, it's also available on our contact us page, which is on the website. So all of that is totally doable, and we respond fairly fast.
Awesome. So thank you again, Mayank, and thank you everyone for joining us in this session. So we hope to see you in ESSEC if you were to apply for one of our programs. And thank you for your time again. Goodbye. Hello once again to everyone, and thank you for staying with us in the second session of this webinar. For those of you who are interested to enter into the world's top business schools like ESSEC, the Graduate Management Admission Test, commonly known as the GMAT, is a familiar entry requirement in most application processes. So what exactly does the GMAT entail, and why is it used commonly by B schools worldwide to assess candidates? And how can you prepare for the test in such a way that gets you to your ideal score? It is my great pleasure to have Mr. James Barker, who is the Market Development Manager for Europe from the Graduate Management Admission Council, to guide potential masters and MBA candidates like you to prepare for the GMAT. Welcome, James. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne, so much for the invitation to join the ESSEC session this week. It's great to be with you and have the opportunity to present the GMAT to your candidates. So as you can see, I'm still working from home, so forgive any possible background noise, but hopefully it shouldn't be too bad today. So as Yvonne says, today's topic is all about the GMAT exam, and more specifically, really understanding what it is and how to get started on your process of preparation. So we're going to be doing a few things today. We're going to be looking at who should take the GMAT exam and why. Then we'll do a deeper dive into the examination itself, so looking at the content of the exam, and hopefully reassuring you that the skills being assessed here are really things that you're utilising already in the world of work, or as part of your undergraduate degree. And then finally, we'll start thinking about the test preparation, how to get started, and some tips and tricks as to how to be efficient in preparing for the GMAT exam. Okay, so why take the GMAT exam, and what is the GMAT exam? So the GMAT exam was first developed back in the 1960s by a group of leading business schools who wanted to have further confidence in the suitability of individuals for top-level MBA or master's programs. What we're looking to do on the GMAT is to assess your likelihood for potential academic success on an MBA or a pre-experienced master's course in business or management. And we do this by assessing your critical reasoning and your logical thinking skills. So today, the GMAT is used by over 7,000 programs worldwide, and over 150,000 people take the exam every year. And furthermore, it also measures skills that, as I say, you're using in the world of work, but are also in demand by today's employers as well. But of course, we want to understand what the value of the GMAT really is. And in a way, there's two sides to the story here. One, there's the value for the business schools, which Yvonne has started to allude to and can probably talk about more later. But then there's also value for the candidates as well. So for the business schools, the GMAT allows them to accurately compare academic potential across the applicant pool. So the GMAT will be the same experience if you're taking the exam in Singapore, in Japan, in New York, wherever it may be, whereas undergraduate GPA, for example, can be more open to interpretation. So it's a fair indicator of success, and it also allows them to assess your commitment to going to a graduate management program. But of course, as candidates, you really want to know what's in it for you. So why should you take the GMAT exam? And there are kind of four main reasons that we can identify here. Firstly, there's the opportunity to stand out. So clearly, the higher your GMAT score, the more desirable your profile might start to become. Secondly, it can also allow you to compensate. So perhaps you don't feel that your undergraduate degree score was as strong as it could be, or perhaps you're looking to transfer from another discipline. Maybe you're coming to the MBA, for example, from humanities or non-government institutions. It can allow you to show the ESSEC admissions team that you have the suitability to succeed on a top-level Master in Management or MBA program. Thirdly, the GMAT opens the doors to the best business schools in the world, so it's no surprise that highly ranked programs like ESSEC are looking to utilise the GMAT exam. It helps them with their selectivity. And some business schools even use the exam to help with their scholarship processes. And then finally, it can prepare you for going back to business school. So if you've been working for 5, 6, 7 years, as the typical MBA profile might be, or even if you're coming into a pre-experienced program from your first degree, going through that GMAT exam preparation process can help you get ready and back into that academic mindset. But of course, it's important to remember that the GMAT is only one part of a whole application package. So as I mentioned, we're only here to assess your critical reasoning and your logical thinking skills. There are going to be many other factors that will make you a fantastic candidate for the ESSEC programs. Things like your professional skills, your leadership potential, the things that you do in your spare time that make you a fantastic person to have on campus. And these will be assessed by the business schools in different ways. So through the essays, through the interviews, and again, I'm sure that Yvonne will be explaining more about the ESSEC process during the course of the sessions this week. Okay, so now we'll move on to break down the GMAT exam. So to begin to explain what you can expect to encounter during the examination process. So on the GMAT, we have 4 specific sections, each looking to assess and measure a skill that you'll be using in business school and beyond. So the 4 sections are laid out here, and I'll talk them through one by one, and then also hopefully try and refer them back to the sorts of skills that you'll be using at the moment. So firstly, we have the analytical writing section. Here, you're given a statement, and you have to write a short, critical response to that statement. The point here is to show that you can analyse arguments and take an informed position whilst writing clearly and effectively. So this is similar to writing any essay that you might have done at your undergraduate institution. It's similar to making a case at work even when you're writing an email to your boss or to a colleague. We're looking to see that you can, as I say, analyse that argument and write clearly and effectively under that exam condition. This section takes 30 minutes to complete and has its own individual score out of 6. Moving on, we have integrated reasoning. Again, this is a 30-minute section. It has 12 questions. I've just spotted a typo on my slide there. And it has its own individual score out of 8. There are 4 different question types here. We have multi-source reasoning. There's the analysis of tables. There's the interpretation of graphs. And there's 2-part analysis where you're given 2 data sets that you have to make trade-offs against to come to the most relevant answer to the questions that are provided to you. So here we're looking to see that you can integrate different pieces of information to draw inferences and to make valid conclusions. And in a way, this is similar to doing a consulting project or a dissertation at university, in that you don't utilize all pieces of information you have to hand. You make trade-offs to support your argument or to problem solve a particular question that's been given to you. Moving on, we have the 2 sections of the GMAT that maybe go to give maybe the meat of the examination, you might say. So we have the quantitative reasoning section and the verbal reasoning section. The quantitative reasoning section takes 62 minutes to complete and has 31 questions. And there are two different question types here. There's problem solving, which involves basic arithmetic, geometry, and algebra. And there's data sufficiency, where you have to decide whether you have enough information to solve a particular problem in theory. These are multiple choice questions with 5 different options attached to each of them. So clearly what we're looking to do here is to see that you can work with numbers and evaluate a wide range of data sources, which of course is going to be key for those more numerical courses that you'll be undertaking at business school. And then finally, the verbal reasoning has 36 questions and takes 65 minutes to complete. There are 3 different question types here. There's reading comprehension, so looking to see that you can understand arguments in written form. There's critical reasoning, where you have to identify flaws in any given argument. And then finally, there's sentence correction, where you have to give a series of sentences amendments to give them the most clarity. So what we're looking to do here is to see that you can synthesize your reading, you can evaluate arguments, and once again, make trade-offs and make decisions. So again, this is similar to any reading that you'll be doing as part of your undergraduate degree or in the world of work. You don't blindly consume the information, you reason with it, you analyze it, you interrogate it. And again, this is what the verbal reasoning section is there to show that you can do. So these 2 sections go into the complex GMAT algorithm to give you your GMAT total score out of 800. So when you're speaking to ESSEC, you might hear them talk about their minimum GMAT requirement or their class average GMAT requirement. And what they're talking about here is the quantitative and the verbal sections combined. Moving on to look at the examination structure. So now you can take the GMAT online or in a testing centre, but the 2 formats reflect identical structures. And one of the benefits of the GMAT exam is you can actually choose the order in which you take the examination. So you can either take it in the traditional way, so number 1, starting out with the AWA and the IR, then doing the quant and the verbal. Or you can choose to start with the quantitative section or start with the verbal section. Either way, we know that your total score will be exactly the same, but it just gives you more control over your exam experience. So when you're doing your preparation, it's worth thinking about how you feel most comfortable. Do you want to get the easier material out of the way first and ease into the examination? Or do you prefer to tackle the harder concepts whilst you're feeling fresher? Either way, that choice is now yours. So again, just to give that overview as to the differences between the GMAT at the test centre or the online, really, they are basically now the same. So when the exam first came out for the online delivery back during the pandemic, there were some differences. But now you can choose the order for the GMAT online as well. The length of the exam is exactly the same. You can take the GMAT up to 5 times in any 12-month period. But if you feel that you might be getting addicted to the GMAT, do be aware you can only take it 8 times in your lifetime. The main difference is actually the appointment availability. So you have the opportunity to take the GMAT online 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Whereas, of course, for the test centre, you have to make sure there's an appointment available when you want to take the examination. The price of the exam does vary based on your particular location, so please do check on gmat.com. It's also important to realise that your GMAT score is valid for 5 years. So if you've got a bit of a break now, maybe a sabbatical, maybe you're finishing your undergraduate degree, it's worth considering getting that GMAT in the bank, and then it's ready for you to either apply now, which I'm sure is what the ESSEC team is hoping for, or in the future if you decide to take some time to do an internship, build some work experience, whatever it may be. You can access your GMAT score via your gmat.com account and make it available to the business schools that you're applying to. This will be with you within 5 days for the test centre or within 7 days for the GMAT online. You can also preview and accept or cancel your GMAT score and decide whether or not you want to make it available to the business schools that you're applying to. So at the end of the examination, your total score will appear, and you then have 2 minutes to decide if you're happy with it, you accept it, and it gets sent off to ESSEC, or you decide to cancel it, and no one will know that you've made that attempt. So do think about your score preview strategy, and there's more details again on that on the website. Okay. So the most common question that we get at GMAC when we go to events and webinars and meet with students is all about the preparation process. So people always want to know the best strategies for preparing for the GMAT exam. And probably the most common question is how much time people should spend preparing for the GMAT. And the answer really is it does depend on you. So it depends on your background, it depends on the score level that you're looking to attain, it depends on your comfort with the subject matter and the question types. But here you can see some data that students have told us how long they've spent preparing for the GMAT and the examination outcome that they've obtained. This is self-reported data, so people do tend to underreport, but the takeaway here is that the longer you spend preparing for the GMAT exam, the higher your GMAT score is likely to become. And I realise that sounds incredibly obvious, but when I used to work in admissions, I'd often meet people with great profiles and poor GMAT scores. And when I would dig a bit deeper, it would always be because they'd not made their preparations and thought they could just walk into the test centre and succeed on the GMAT. But giving time to the GMAT preparation allows you to do two main things. One, it allows you to tackle a broader range of question difficulty, so you can then get into those higher score bands. But secondly, it also allows you to think about your timing and exam management strategies. So there's a penalty applied if you do not finish the quantitative or the verbal section. So it's worth thinking about how you're going to efficiently work through the material to ensure that you complete those two sections. Of course, GMAC has a range of resources that can help you with this process of preparation. And if you only do one thing, then please do look at the GMAT official prep starter kit. This is completely free of charge to access from the website, and it will give you access to 90 real former GMAT questions, and will explain how the answers are gotten to. There are also 2 practice exams that work in the same way as the real GMAT will, either take it online or in the testing centre. And there's also some diagnostic activity around these exams as well. So it can tell you where you're doing well and where you're doing less well, and can really help you to focus down that preparation. And of course, utilising those practice exams will allow you to think about your management and your pacing, that important timing that I was speaking about a moment ago. And then, of course, you can do a deeper dive using some of the further materials. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the official guide. So this is our chunky book if you buy the physical copy, also now an ebook, which details all of the 4 sections of the GMAT exam and gives answer explanations and examples of how to go about answering those questions. There's also a whole range of unofficial resources in the marketplace as well. I recommend starting out with an official guide because they have the real former GMAT questions. But if a particular concept isn't sticking with you and you feel that you want it explained in a different way, then maybe some of the unofficial resources could also help. I don't really mind as long as you're taking the GMAT to get into the school of your choice. So finally, just some ideas for best practice on test days, so things to get you into the mood of taking the GMAT exam. So firstly, do plan your logistics in advance. So make sure if you're going to the test centre, you know where it is, and you allow enough time to check in. I mean, that's also the same for the GMAT online as well. So make sure that you log on in good time to connect with your exam proctor, so the person monitoring the GMAT online exam. And also make sure you run your systems check in advance as well. So on our website, you can run a check to ensure that your laptop or your PC is capable of running the online GMAT. So make sure you do that in advance. There's also a range of ID that you need to have with you to make sure that the exam is a secure experience. So make sure that you identify what you need to do ahead of time. And again, all of the policies and the most up-to-date information can always be found on gmat.com. During the examination, please do read each question carefully and thoroughly. This will help you to eliminate wrong answers quickly, so you can then make good educated guesses if you need to. Then hopefully, more to the point, it will drive you to the correct answers and the correct decision. Make sure that you confirm your answer only when you're certain that you want to move on to the next question. This is important because you cannot go back and change your answers once you've given them. So there's no way of reviewing or editing answers on the GMAT exam. And this is because we operate under what we call the computer adaptive method, whereby harder questions are served up based on the answer that you've given before, so you can't go back and amend your answers. And as I mentioned, it's important to keep moving through the test. So if you are stuck on a question, it's often a case of making the best educated guess and moving on, rather than risking not completing the quantitative or those verbal sections. And related to that, it's important to keep your eye on the time. So there will be a clock displayed on screen, and this will allow you to pace yourself through the material. So during the preparation process, it's worth thinking about where you need to be in the quant and the verbal section at any given point in time, and that will help you with your pacing as you move through those sections. And then finally, it's important to try or remember to relax. Make sure that you do the preparation to build your confidence. Please try and be refreshed on the examination day, and that will give you the best possible chance of success on the GMAT exam and then subsequently your business school applications. So hopefully in this presentation today, there's been some guidance on how to get started on the GMAT exam, some information on the context of the exam and the material. But Yvonne, that's all I have to say today. So I'd like to pass the floor back to you for any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you so much, James. It's been a great presentation by you, and I will now proceed to the Q&A segment, where I'll pose to you some of the frequently asked questions on behalf of our participants. So take, for example, would you recommend candidates to go through a diagnostic test at the very beginning, or just plunge headlong into preparation mode with their self-guided resources or the kit that GMAT has in store for these applicants?
Yeah, so I think the starter kit's really important for that self-diagnostic. So yes, there are 2 practice exams. So I would not recommend doing a practice exam straight away, but I would recommend looking at those 90 free of charge questions, because that will allow the candidate to think about where they have strengths and where they have weaknesses. Then after a period of time, yes, it's probably worth thinking about taking the first practice exam to think about the pacing and the timing, and also to get a rough idea as to the level of ability. Then there probably is a need to go back and do some deeper preparation using the resources that we have before taking that second practice exam, and then hopefully seeing the improvement in scoring. But certainly the self-diagnosis is important, as I say, to get really started on making your own personal preparation plan. I wish there was something that would fit everyone, but everyone's different, of course, with different backgrounds. So it's important for the individual to think about what they need to do to get to the score level that they require for the business schools of their choice.
Right. And how many tests is one person entitled to take in the whole course of the endeavor?
In terms of the practice exams, then we have additional practice exams that can be purchased online. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the actual real life examination, you can only take the exam 5 times within any 12-month period, or 8 times in your lifetime. That's for examination security purposes, so making sure that questions aren't seen too frequently. However, we've got data that shows that after a second or third attempt on the GMAT, the computer will find an accurate level of ability. So yes, you might see a 40 or 50 point improvement on the second attempt, but after that you may only go up 10 or 20 points, and really that's not a great amount in terms of GMAC scaling. So as I say, once we see people taking the exam 3rd, 4th, 5th time, people's scores do tend to level out. So with good preparation, you should be nailing it in the 1st or 2nd attempt.
Right, and even better still to just go through what are the strengths and weaknesses for every step of the way and prepare solidly and well for the next endeavor, so that you don't actually have too much of a gap in between. And you can then keep the number of attempts as short as possible.
Exactly. And also it's important to keep in mind that you have to wait 16 days to take the examination again. So actually one tip is to really make sure you're planning ahead for your application deadline. So if you know that ESSEC has a certain cutoff, then work back from there and ensure that you're planning time A, to take the GMAT and get the score that you need, but then also build in a buffer just in case you do need to make a second attempt.
Right. Then in this case, what's the best way to keep track of one's progress? Because time is of the essence. So when one prepares for the GMAT, does it even help to have a study buddy on top of a very defined study plan?
Do you mean a study partner, like a friend to help?
Yes.
Yeah, I think if you're going through the process with someone else, then of course, it's great to share the experience and to share the expertise. And maybe you'll find people on your undergraduate campus, for example, who have different strengths, and you can maybe do an ideas and skills exchange. But of course, many people prepare for the GMAT by themselves as well. My advice is also to think about your preferred method of study and your preferred method of preparation. So are you someone who likes to be in a room with other people and you can still focus in that environment? Or do you find that you actually just need to get your head down and take very focused preparation?
Right. Okay, cool. And how is the GMAT scored? And how does one make sense of one's score in relation to the average GMAT test scores? I think for many people who take the GMAT for the first time, they might be wondering, okay, with a score of say 550, where do I actually pitch myself in a whole scheme of things? Is that a good or a not so good grade? So how do I actually assess myself?
Yeah, I think it's important when you think about the total score and to think about the appropriateness of the total score. So you're not going to need a super high GMAT score for every individual program. So it's important to understand what the business school is really looking for. So, some business schools will say that a minimum of 600 is required, for example. That's quite common for master's orientated programs. But as I say, it's just a case of speaking to the admissions teams and finding out what they really are looking for from you. If you do take the GMAT exam and find that your score is maybe not as high as you feel it could be, we also offer what we call the enhanced score report. And this can give you more detailed diagnostics as to where you've done well on the GMAT exam and also where you've maybe done less well. It will also allow you to think about your timing strategies. So for example, we can tell you how long you've spent on each individual section, then also how long you've spent on each individual question type. So if you find you're wasting, in inverted commas, too much time on data sufficiency, then maybe a strategy for the second attempt would be to focus on those questions and think about how you can go about answering them more efficiently and more effectively.
Right. So moving on to another aspect of the presentation that you have gone through earlier. So you mentioned that there were no structural differences between the GMAT test center exam and GMAT online. So in this regard, how would you advise a candidate to make the choice between the two?
I think one of the most important things to think about, first of all, is that the business schools will be seeing each examination format equally. So I've not heard of any business school say that they prefer the test center or they prefer the online. I'm fairly sure, Yvonne, correct me if I'm wrong, that would be the case for essay.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
So really, again, it comes down to your examination philosophy and also your physical environment. So for example, if you are an undergraduate student in a hall of residence, for example, with lots of noise and background activity, maybe the GMAT online is not going to be as appropriate. But maybe if you're thinking about applying for an MBA and you're fortunate enough to have a nice apartment with lots of space and calm, then maybe the GMAT online could be a flexible and convenient option for you. But overall, it's just a case about thinking about your examination methodology as well. So some people, for example, might feel more comfortable in their own environment. So the GMAT online is the obvious choice there. But some people might like the psychology of literally going to the testing center, going through the ritual and the process of the examination, and might feel they'll do better taking the exam physically. But the choice is yours. So during the preparation process, give that some thought.
Right. And may I also add that for candidates who come from places where the internet connection is not that stable, GMAT online probably is less of a favorable choice compared to the exam the physical exam. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's up to the individual to think about the level of risk associated with taking the GMAT online. So, clearly it is designed to be a global solution. We offer it all over the world with the exception of China, for example, for regulatory reasons. So yes, it's important for the individual to think about their ability to complete the GMAT online within our regulations. So they're all listed on MBA.com. But also, regardless of where you're taking the GMAT online, to make sure that the systems are working appropriately as well. So, making sure that your laptop can run the software is the most important thing. And again, that diagnostic is on the website. So, for example, we have heard of some, if people are trying to take the GMAT online on their company laptop, for example, with security features, it can block some of the usability of the GMAT. Hopefully that's a rare case, but as I say, check that in advance before you make your choice.
Right. Okay. And my next question is also about choices. So what are the key differences between GMAT and GRE? Because we do hear masters and MBAs hopefuls trying to get into the program with either of these two scores.
Mm-hmm. So of course the exams are kind of broadly similar in the sense that they are both looking at certain aspects of critical reasoning and logical thinking. However, I think it's important to remember that the GMAT was developed by business schools for business schools. So therefore the criteria that we're specifically looking at are directly tied to outcomes on MBA and Master in Management sorts of programs. We also offer a total score, which is something that the GRE does not. So in terms of being able to translate your performance and interpret your performance, there could be something to be said there as well. But yeah, apart from that, the core thing with the GMAT is that it was developed by business schools for business schools and is still the most commonly accepted exam for business school admissions worldwide.
Right, that's a great explanation. Last but not least, I'm going to save the best for last because I would like you to debunk some of the myths and the threats associated with GMAT. So I've heard candidates who actually say that, I actually focus on getting the right answers for the difficult questions rather than be mindful of the time. And that's also one of the things that you mentioned earlier on in your presentation. They have this impression that because I get the right answers to the difficult questions, that will give me more points. But probably this might not be the case because time-wise, it will actually work to their disadvantage. Is that correct?
So one of the things to keep in mind with the GMAT, Yvonne, is that there's lots of great resources on the internet, but there's also a lot of myth and gossip and conjecture. And one of the things that people do often say is that the first 10 questions are the most important because they feel that if they focus on the first 10 questions, they'll get into the higher score bracket and then they'll obviously achieve a good total score at the end. However, it's important to remember that every question counts in the scoring. So if you fail to complete the section, then that could then have a negative impact on your total score. So the risk of falling into that particular trap is to think, well, I'm going to focus on the first 10 questions. But as I say, the risk there is that you then may not finish those sections and end up with a worse score. So keep in mind that every question counts in the scoring. So it's important to move through the examination efficiently to complete the quantitative and the verbal sections.
Right. So it also means that the candidate has to answer every question, no matter how difficult it is. So like what you've mentioned earlier, to take an educated guess if it becomes a little bit too complicated for normal reasoning. Is that the case?
Exactly. So it's always better to finish the sections than to not. Because of the complex scoring on GMAT, there are certain scenarios around that as well, which are detailed on the website and some blog posts by our test development schemes. But the basic advice is to complete those 2 sections to your best ability. As I say, through good preparation, you'll be able to quickly identify what questions are looking for you to do. You'll quickly be able to identify clearly, obviously wrong answers, which will then allow you to focus on getting the correct answer more efficiently. Or, as you say, Yvonne, in the worst case scenario, at least if you've narrowed it down to 2 out of 5 rather than 5 out of 5, if you do need to make a good educated guess to move on, at least then your chances are enhanced.
Right. Okay. And one last question, which you have actually raised earlier. So if I were to take the GMAT test, like for at least a few consecutive attempts, I would probably reach a certain plateau in terms of what I can score. And how then do I make sure that I am not taking more than what is necessary in terms of the attempts that will hamper my chances of getting the score that I want?
Again, it just comes down to that focused preparation. So putting yourself in the best possible position to give the best account of yourself on the examination day. So the reason why scores level out is because of the accuracy of the scoring of the GMAT exam. So there's quite complicated data science behind the examination. And that's, as I say, why the computer will find your level of ability. But as I say, if you focus well, then hopefully your first attempt will be a good one. And if you do need to take a second attempt, hopefully it will be a better one. But after that particular point in time, scores do tend to level out. So as I say, the key thing really is to prepare. I wish I had more of a magic answer than that, but it is simply coming down to thinking about familiarity with the questions, familiarity with the examination structure, and familiarity with the timing of the GMAT exam.
Great. So with that, we have come to the end of the webinar, and thank you so much, James, for your time and participation. I'm sure the participants have learned a lot from your insightful sharing. I wish everyone a smooth journey in your GMAT preparation and every success in getting into the ESSEC family. Goodbye.